For new people to Archive Shuttle, this is one of the most often asked questions, so let's spend a little bit of time looking through what that means. When we try to address the question of whether Archive Shuttle is working or not, we have to look at a few different things. We can assume that at some point, Archive Shuttle has been working in this environment. If you are using Quadrotech services already, your consultant won't have left you with a completely broken system, and the Managed Operations team are always reviewing your environment too, if this is a managed migration. So at a high level, we need to look at import, we need to look at export, and we need to look at the available mappings. These are the mappings which are active or eligible to be importing and exporting. There might, depending on your environment, be a lot of archives in one or more source environments which are not eligible to be migrated. They might be out of scope, or they might have dependencies and can't be migrated until some other activities have taken place. So the fact that there are a lot of archives, or even that there are a lot of mappings, might not mean that they are all active, mapped, and should be exporting and importing. We need to bear that in mind when we look at a system. If we've gotten this far, and there should be processing happening, we can start to review some of the environmental aspects relating to Archive Shuttle, and whether or not they are impacting whether export or import should be happening right now. Let's take a moment and look at some of these things in turn. Looking at the export side of Archive Shuttle is pretty easy. As it's not something that you will be really doing 24/7, let's spend a moment to look at the different places that you can see your information relating to export. Here we see the progress and performance page. As you might discover in our online documentation, you can customize what you see on this page, and you can turn on auto refresh. Auto refresh might be useful if you want to watch performance over the course of a little while, and have the page open on a second or third computer screen. Here is where we see export. We see that there is export information in terms of items per hour, and we see there is export information in terms of gigabytes per hour. It's worth pointing out that both of these being high or both being low, or one being high and one being low, might be normal, depending on your migration. For example, the items per hour might be low, but the gigabytes per hour might be high if you have lots of large items. In that case, there are few items being exported, but they're big. Your consultant will have shown you or talked about what is normal sort of figures that you could expect, so when you look at the statistic, bear that in mind. Both items per hour and gigabytes per hour can also sometimes be zero, and that might be normal as well. We'll go into that some more in another module, but essentially what it might mean is that the staging error is full, or a high watermark has been reached on a particular link. If either of these is the case, you might see exports appear to stop and start from time to time. They might run for 10 to 30 minutes, but they might stop for 30 to 60 minutes. Moving on to import. This can be seen in the same place as export because the two are often linked together in people's mind. It's the obvious next thing to think about if exports are or aren't running. There might be glitches from time to time when imports again shown in items per hour and gigabytes per hour show zero, but more or less the rest of the time the import should be running. Usually we see that import performance is lower than export performance. For both export and import performance, we can also see statistics over the last hour, the last day, and so on in this table on the progress and performance page. We can also go to the performance page in the UI and see similar information. This is shown now in the video. You can see on this screen that there is an indicator to show how a particular hour in the day compares with the previous hour. The page is more commonly used to look at what the performance is like over the last day or two, or even the last week. Say you check this on the Monday morning, you can see what the performance was like over the weekend. If exports or imports aren't running, you might then want to move on to look at the available mappings. We can see these on the Stage 1 screen, like we see here. We'd usually start by looking at it. Perhaps we can change the sort order, and perhaps we can filter on the mappings which haven't yet entered Stage 2. Generally speaking, these mappings should be the ones which are exporting and importing. We're looking here to see if there are a large number of errors. That might indicate the reason why exports or imports appear to have stopped. If we've discovered that there are mappings which should be exporting and importing, and that there aren't a lot of errors, then we might want to look a bit deeper to see why things don't appear to be working as they should. Let's start by taking a look at the System Health page in the UI. This can help us see the issues. We can see on this screen right now that the import module is not running. So, since exports have stopped and imports have stopped, the reason in this case is that the import module is not running. We can start the module and see what happens. Let's do that now from the module page in the user interface. There are lots of other things that the System Health page might show us. For example, in some migrations, like an Enterprise Vault to Enterprise Vault migration, it can show us if the retention categories in the source and the target are all mapped. If they're not, and items are exported, they can't be imported, because we don't know which retention category to associate them with. The System Health page can also show us when a link has reached the high watermark. It can also show us when the staging error is full. This step of looking in more detail is quite complex and covers a lot of different things. We'll touch on those in the next few modules. So when it comes to answering the question about whether it is working, this is a summary of the things we can look at.